1, 2, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? This is Preach Jacobs once again for the Worthy Cause podcast with your host, me, Preach Jacobs, for the Arena Network. Check us out on the arenasc.com. The Arena, the place where we're going to talk to people that's involved in art, music, culture, politics, all things that are dope in South Carolina. Right now in the home studio, we have somebody where we have that connective tissue with art and community. We have our man, Xavier Blake, who is let me get this right.
All right.
Is this the president of One Columbia?
Executive director.
Executive director of One Columbia.
For sure.
Thank you for coming by to the crib. And we don't have Drew, the producer, to have multiple camera angles. So this is all that shit y'all gonna get today. So I guess when I start off talking to people for the pod, I begin with this thesis question, which is basically like being a creative for so many years. People always try to encourage me to move out of South Carolina. You got to move out of South Carolina. You got to go to Atlanta. You got to go to New York.
Sure.
And I say, when you make a decision to stay in South Carolina, that in itself feels like a revolutionary act. So first and foremost, why South Carolina? Why are you here? Are you from here? Tell your origin story.
Well, first, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Congratulations for the new podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
And the stuff you're doing is fantastic. And I've seen some of the guests you had on here.
Yeah.
So I'm honored to be involved in that group.
Stop it. Thank you for pulling up. And these are my arms, everybody. Enjoy these beige arms.
Yeah. So I grew up in Bamberg, South Carolina. A little small town, about an hour from Columbia. A little too light town. Great community. Went to school at Newberry College. Spent 2 decades working at the PBS station here in South Carolina, which was great. And I love the community of South Carolina. I love everything about South Carolina. But I did move to New York for a little bit.
Okay.
So I took a detour up to upstate New York, and I intentionally came back to South Carolina. I think South Carolina, and Columbia for that point. I think South Carolina is the kind of place that has so many stories that need to be told. It's so rich in culture and history and people and community. And Columbia was a destination for me to come back to because I wanted to be a part of what was going on here. I think we're in the middle of a like you said, a revolution in Columbia.
Yeah.
There feels to be like a kindling going on around town where everybody's doing this amazing work. And so I'm just trying to maybe put those pieces together so we can rise together.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is interesting because I've been bringing up the past couple of interviews about the theory of this documentary that's encouraging people to move back to the South, right?
Yeah.
And it's like reverse migration.
Yeah, I read that story.
Yeah, where the idea is basically like, look, I know in times during the civil rights movement and prior to that, Black folks are saying, like, let's move out of the South because, it's going to be less crucial or harmful treatment in Jim Crow. But now there's an encouragement of this reverse migration of like, move to the South where there's a higher concentration of African Americans, where we can have a higher concentration of political power.
Sure.
So you're seeing a lot of younger people that are making a decision not only to move back to the South, but to stay in the South. There's a lot of young people
Absolutely.
That are deciding to stay here. And so in my mind, I think when young people want to stay here, I think they ask the questions, is there enough cool shit going on that they want to be here?
Oh, man, 100%.
Yeah.
It's funny you say about the migration away. I just got finished reading The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabella Wilkerson. She talks about that migration up north and out west for Black people out of the South. But I do think you're right. There's been a reinvention of people coming back to the South. But there is plenty of cool stuff to do. Like, last week I went to 7 different events, I think, in 3 days, and there was just so much stuff happening and so much cool stuff going on and so many cool people doing stuff. I mean, to your point, you do everything in Columbia. I was talking to somebody last week. Sanford Green and I were talking the other day. Yeah. He said, you going to something preaching on Friday? I said, what's that man doing now? That man got something going on every week, every day, and so there's plenty of stuff to do, man. And I think there's a thirst for it. People want to do things. People want to be out in the community. And one thing about the South, too, our weather helps that. You can be out, 7 months out of the year, 9 months out of the year. I was in upstate New York. I told somebody I went to work one morning and it was 6 degrees. I left work at 3:30 and it was 5 degrees and it was pitch black dark. That doesn't really engender me want to be outside doing stuff. But in the South, you don't have that problem, man. Beautiful sunshine, beautiful weather.
This man from Bamberg and 6-degree weather, like
I stuck it like a sore thumb, but I did become a cross country skier. I told myself that I was going to embrace the winter, so I bought some cross country skis, and I got pretty decent at it. Not downhill, but very slow treading on the cross country. Yeah, for sure. Troy, New York.
All right. Okay. So you I got another question, but I get there later. So you ski now. Is there any other crazy non-traditional black shit that you've done? Have you bungee jumped or anything like that?
No, we did a lot of hiking up that way too. Though,
Okay.
My wife got some of those sticks, and she wanted to go hiking, so we did a lot of hiking.
So you ever hike with the skis on? You ever done that?
No. Cross country is not really skiing. It's like walking with skis, So it ain't, I ain't sloshing down.
Okay.
I know the Olympics. I ain't sloshing down the hill. You know what I mean? So it's very, very, very easy. Very easy. Very easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about a lot of great shit that's going on, my theory is always younger people, and especially for me, is that they'll look at the arts community as kind of a measuring stick to be like, is this a place I want to be at?
Sure.
Do we get cool concerts here? Do we have great local artists here? And I think that the work with One Columbia is really important because, and for me to be a partner and owning an art gallery, we were really, really specific about being hyper local, right? And not just hyper local within having a lot of South Carolina, a lot of Columbia, and some regional artists.
Sure.
My personal goal was I wanted artists to be able to say, hey, I had my first exhibit in that gallery.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's a very, very intentional thing.
Absolutely.
Tell us about One Columbia. What does that do, and what drew you to that?
Yeah. So we are the designated local arts agency for the city, right? And so what that means is we try to liaison between city government, city council, and mayor's office, who's been great since I've been hired in this position, and try to find resources and opportunities for artists to do things in our city. Everybody knows economic development is a big deal in cities, but art drives that. And our city council and our mayor understand that proposition. So supporting the artists in that endeavor also builds businesses, it builds community, it builds tourism. And we are a hyper-local agency. We are for Columbia and surrounding areas, which I really appreciate too. I like focusing on where I live and trying to make that place better. Yeah. And there are tons of amazing artists I've met over the last, because I've been in this job about almost 10 months now, over the last 10 months. Like I said, there's so many people, man, just doing incredible work in these pockets around Columbia. But my goal is to try to interconnect those and make that spider web so we can support everybody and just raise the whole bar.
So One Columbia, is it more focused on just public art, or what's the
public art is under our umbrella, but we also help other arts nonprofits and other just regular artists, literary, visual, sculptures. The poet laureate Jennifer Bartel-Barkin is also a part of our One Columbia group, so we support her. She has
I need to get her on the show too.
She got a Soda City Poetry Festival coming up next month. Which is amazing, and so she's been doing incredible work around Columbia and the community too. So there are just so many cool things happening and people doing them. Like I said, I think the one thing I do think is a little fragmented. I think a lot of times, in the world we live in, sometimes we can get siloed and just be so content on doing our work. But I'm a big community builder, and I believe we go further together. There's a wonderful book by Heather McGee that talks about the sum of us all. She talks about that collective effort, that collective push. And not thinking about a zero-sum game where if I get something and you get less. I've been telling people the last 10 months, more is more. Yeah. And Columbia can stand more, and Columbia wants more, and Columbia can take it all. Columbia can take everything we can give it, and they'll be asking for more.
Yeah. How long have you been in Columbia?
Gosh, so I went to Newberry College, graduated in 1999.
Damn.
Yeah, I know, right? and I started at ETV in 2000. Okay. So I lived here for since 2000.
Oh wow. Okay. So as far as being involved, I mean, now that you're kind of professionally involved in the arts community as a facilitator,
sure.
What are the biggest differences you see from the time you first moved here to now? Yeah,
it's completely a different space for me because I was kind of a creative. I was a documentary filmmaker, producer at PBS, and I just traveled across the entire state doing work. But for me, I think the biggest difference is the diversity of opportunities for people to do things. Mm-hmm. I was talking with somebody today, and on Main Street, just restaurant wise, you can eat, Japanese, you can eat Mexican, you can eat Korean, you can eat, Taiwanese, Japanese. There's so many different options. And I think Columbia has turned into this city that's just full of diversity and different things to do. Yeah. And which is cool because everybody's palate is different.
Yeah. I mean, and I always look at everything from a hip hop lens sure. because that's where I come from. Mm-hmm. And I remember what it felt like to, not be able to have venues want to deal with you because it was this bad stigma with hip hop culture, right? Yeah. And I always tell people when we talk about mixtape culture, I always tell people mixtape culture for hip hop is the same way that a garage band can do shows at a rock venue. Right. Because if you're in a city that doesn't give you an opportunity to lively amplify yourself or to present your work, what's the way you're going to get the crowd to see what you're doing, that's where the mixtape culture came from.
Right.
And I say that to say, one of the biggest things that I always realized was it wasn't about the talent of the artist, right? Because there's always a thing about, when people were trying to encourage me to leave South Carolina, you would go to these different places and I'll be like, yo, the music scene in Columbia is just as dope, if not better.
Facts.
The visual artists from Columbia are just as dope, if not better.
Facts.
The bigger thing that Columbia might not have that these other cities have are the outlets for them to be able to do
Correct.
that. So tell us about the Duke Street House and how it's available for artists in the community.
Absolutely. One of the things we do at One Columbia, we have an office space in North Main, Duke Avenue, and so it's an incredible old house, but it's a very quaint, feel good spot. Mm-hmm. And so that spot is open to artists for free. They can just send us an email. We can try to find time with a date to put them in, lock them in. Mm-hmm. We've done everything in the house from, poetry openings and book readings to casting calls and video shoots. There's some plans in the works to maybe do like a tiny desk-ish concert.
Yo, I would love
we're gonna call it a house party at Duke Avenue, I think.
Okay.
Like
all right. Okay.
Talk with some people around town, and we're gonna make it, very, we can't have a ton of people, but I think that'll add to the allure of it. Where standing room only, you get an invite, you come into this place, and it's just amazing.
And shoot the hell out of it.
Yeah. We're gonna video it. We're gonna video it. We're gonna try to put it online, and so we're talking about that because I think one of the things I realized too is that artists are super innovative, man, and they're so creative in terms of trying to find new ways to do things, and they don't need much. They just need a little bit of help and a little bit of space. One of the things I'm excited about too is the city is leased us a space down in the corner of Assembly and Taylor. Mm-hmm. So there's a parking garage there, and there was an old police substation in front of that that's been empty for a while, about 1,000 square feet. So Mayor Rickerman was very forward thinking, and City Council and City Manager Teresa Wilson, they leased that space for free. And so we're going to put 4 artists in there as a working artist space.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So and we're not going to charge the artists any rent. We actually had a call. It closed last week. We going through the process now, figuring out who it's going to be. But to have a space where artists can work and do their work, big scale, small scale, sell, but also maybe teach classes out of that space.
Absolutely. And
so that kind of transform that corner of Columbia into something a little bit different, but what I think artists need, just a little bit of help.
Is this space available now, or is this something y'all still working on?
No. So I hope to have people in about a month. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we opened the call. We had about 15 applicants. We had a panel of jury decide who that was going to be. I wasn't involved at all. And so we're going to put, like I said, 3 artists in, man. It's going to be, I think, a really cool way to think about using space. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing I think I'm really interested in because, Columbia is full of great venues and great things, but there's some spaces that we can use, maybe temporary pop-ups, just exhibit somewhere in an office space on Main Street. I've been talking with some business on Main Street about maybe having artists in the lobby and be able to sell their work. Because one of the things that the artists in Columbia have been talking to me about, the first thing was space and the ability to be able to sell their work. Because an artist, you are an artist. You work and you make stuff and you create, but you also want to make money off of it. Yeah. So trying to create this opportunity for artists to be able to live and work in Columbia is something that I think is really important to me.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because I think that as an artist for so many years, we're always taught that your art is something that's going to be either a side hustle or you got to figure something else out to do. Yep. It's and it's weird. I feel like communities respect careers that the community invests in. So for an example, I always joke with people when we're talking about, there's a comedian that had this joke where he was saying a real sad day in Black America is when we found out that Idris Elba wasn't from Baltimore, right? He was like, I knew that string of bell. He's from Baltimore. He said, because I'm watching him do an interview, and he's like, for breakfast I eat a bowl of beans. Yeah. And he was like, what?
Well, that's like Franklin, off of Snowfall.
He's British, right?
Franklin is not American either.
Well, and so my theory is always this: when people are like, why do these British actors, why are they so great, or blah blah blah? And my theory is always this: in London, saying I'm an actor to my parents is just as respected as saying I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not like being here. If you tell your mom and your dad that you got to be an actor, especially.
I worked in nonprofit at PBS for 2 decades as a filmmaker. So what is a filmmaker? What does that mean? But I tell you the thing I did learn by doing that in terms of art and storytelling and culture is artists and filmmakers and storytellers and griots, they have a pulse on society, and the way they shape our culture and our society is is important. I also think it's never been more important.
Yeah.
I mean, there are tons of things happening in the world right now, in Colombia, in the United States, globally. And I think, we have to follow the artist and listen to what they're saying, because they're able to tell a story about things that sometimes people don't have the words for, right?
Yeah.
In a rap song, or, a ballad, a poetry verse, a visual art piece, a sculpture. Like to me, art, it's the genesis of everything we do as a people. And it crosses all boundaries. It brings people together in a way that some things can't.
Yeah. I'm wondering, I had this conversation with someone, and there was this quote. I can't remember who said it. I think it might have been Chris Rock that said it, where he basically said, the quote was this, and I thought it was really interesting. He said, to white people, Tom Hanks is a great actor.
Sure.
But Denzel was a god to his people.
Yeah.
And the idea of him saying was that, when you have, black creatives in certain spaces, or black people with voices, there's this added responsibility that some of us might feel, right? Sure. So it's one of those things where, hey, and this is personally for me, if I'm being creative, if I'm making music, I don't think using my voice to speak out on things, or to be, I wouldn't say the word political, but let's say political, sure, or to be civically engaged. I don't think there's a separation between that art and that. So I'm wondering, what are some examples that you've seen in Colombia, and your personal ideals on how can art make political and conscious community statements, from filmmaking with you personally to what you're seeing is happening in Colombia? Yeah, no,
I think you're right. I mean, I think as a black creative, even if you work hard at not being political, just sometimes being black in America is. Yeah. And if your work comes from being black in America, it's going to have that politics in it. I talked with a guy in Charleston, Fletcher Williams, tremendous artist, and he talked about it. He said, sometimes he felt that responsibility, and I'm sure a lot of black artists do, to make their work speak to something. Mm-hmm. But what he always said was, I'm true to the work, and the work speaks for itself, and you get what you want out of it. He talked about being an artivist.
Okay. Activist, artist.
Yeah. And I had never heard that term before. And I think, and not just as black artists, I think all artists speak to something in society sometimes that needs spoken to. Mm-hmm. But I do think, to your point, as black creatives, sometimes I think we can feel an added pressure to be the voice for our people when people don't always have
mm-hmm.
a voice.
Do you?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you feel that there's an extended responsibility on your end, not just for black and brown artists, but like for you to understand artists to the point where, like, when you're seeing people asking for money in Colombia, sure, or if you're in a position where you're being able to speak to a city government or somebody that has money or a facility that they can open up for it, like, is that something that you feel like an extra pressure?
100%. I never wanted to be in arts administration. I say this all the time about this job in Colombia. I thought of it as an opportunity to be helpful to people that needed help, artists and creatives. Mm-hmm. And that's, so I do feel like I have a responsibility to make sure I'm trying to pave the ways and open doors and give space, not just for the sake of, for me, but because I think people sometimes only need an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they might not be able to have an angle to get to that door. But if I can be a person that can open that door for people and give them that space to fill it up, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was a creative, worked in public media. I thought I'd be in public media all my life because I love the mission of public media. Yeah. But this to me seemed like a really cool opportunity to help and be a part of a growing city that I really, really care about, that I really think is on the cusp of, not that it's not a great city because people are coming here left and right. Coming is packed. But I think there's a spark happening, there's a kindling happening, yeah, and I feel there's a spirit of community going on now, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, my mom, I don't know if she came up with this or she stole this from somebody, but I think it's a great quote. She says, she's like, Derek is my real name. People don't be saying Derek like y'all know.
Like, literally, for the longest time, I did not know your real name was Derek. Something came up on Facebook. It's like,
who the hell is Derek?
Who's Derek Jacobs? I don't know Derek Jacobs. Who preach? Like, add Derek Jacobs. So on Facebook he's Derek, but on Instagram he's preach. I gotta be careful about that.
All right, well, and plus it gives my family some credit because the amount of times when I say preach Jacobs, women be like, especially black women, your mama named you preach, right? You know what I mean? Like, so no, my mama did not name me preach. Cut us some slack. But she told me this quote, and she said, it's cool to chase your dreams. She says, but more than chasing your dreams, chase your opportunities.
Man.
and for you to say like you intended to be in public media, but you saw something where you're like, yo, I have a skill for this. This is something that I've been seeing. You know what I mean? I mean, hell, I'm podcasting from my house.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and so, this probably wasn't necessarily what I thought was going to happen, but it was an opportunity that really, really made sense.
I'll tell you a quote I heard that really resonates too, and I think this might resonate with you. Like, I think you've had a lot of success in your career in Columbia doing things. Like I walk in here, I see a platinum record on the wall, all this stuff you've done. I see all these amazing things that you've done that have been very successful, right? But I think success is kind of can be singular, but if you want to be substantial, you bring people with you.
Yeah.
And I think with this podcast and the things y'all doing with the arena, it's this legacy kind of building thing where, you may not see the change next year or 3 years or 5 years, but 10, 15 years. And the older I get, the more I think about, like, not right now. I think about what it looks like, what Columbia looks like 10 years from now. And that's kind of where my mindset is going to. Because like I said, success can be very singular, but in order to be substantial in this life we live, I think you bring people with you. And that's what I think.
Yeah, you got to pull while you're climbing.
Come on now, man.
And that's the thing about it. It's like, I come from hip hop culture where there's this idea of you got to be hardcore. You got to stomp on somebody else.
Yeah.
Kind of bad literal terms based on what's happening in hip hop right now. But
I was out of loop for that beef for a long time, but I caught up with it late and whoo.
hip hop is going through a lot of stuff because I wrote about this years ago, and I feel like it's more on point now. Like you gotta understand, like when Snoop and Doggy Style and Dre stuff came out, I was 10 or 11 years old, and these were people, right?
I was in high school. All right, go ahead.
but and that was still 30 years ago.
Right.
But the way that I looked at it was, when you had people like C. Dolores Tucker, that was speaking out against Snoop, as a young person, you're gonna side with the younger, cooler person. But as I got older, I was like, well, C. Dolores Tucker was right. It's like, she marched with Dr. King. I didn't go through all this to get hit with water hoses and marching and being chased by dogs and shit for this type of music to come out. And I say this to say that what I think is happening right now with hip hop culture is that we're auditing and self-auditing a lot of this toxic shit that we bring. And this is me that will sing these toxic songs that I grew up. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a weird relationship that I have with a culture that I love that I grew up with. But it's difficult to have those conversations.
But I think nothing's perfect, right? Like I think, all the things we realize, everything is a full thing, right? And you can't take the good without sometimes having the bad, and you have to kind of be able to analyze those two things. I think it's also good to do audits from time to time. I think I do a lot of self-audits lately. I get and watch how to self-audit and be like, no, what you doing? Why did you decide to do this? I think that's also a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and I think that's also important that you're in the arts community, right? Because my thing is always this, and this is kind of where I give hip hop a little bit of slack, where it's basically like, if NWA is getting treated a certain way because of the language and what's going on, I'm like, well, don't get angry at them for speaking these words. Get angry at the environment that made them write the music.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Sure.
So there's a lot of self-auditing that happens in art, where I think that, if art makes people uncomfortable to a certain degree, if art is something that's just like really vile and vitriol, it's a reason these people are coming out with that. Right. And so, especially being in the South, when you see reverses of Roe v. Wade, when you see, a lot of these gun laws that are changing and making it more accessible for you to get guns.
South Carolina doesn't have a hate crime law.
Yeah, exactly. And me and Hamilton Grandpa was talking about that yesterday. Sure. Especially in South Carolina, when you don't have to look in the civil rights movement when hate crime has happened here. It was one of those things that was the galvanizing reason for us to take this flag down, which, by the way, I read your piece. It was great, and I was a part of that piece. And like I said, and tell us about the documentary that you did.
Yeah. So we did a documentary called Downing of the Flag for PBS, and we worked on it for 2 years, like in the height of COVID. We were all masked up shooting, and it was an incredible comprehensive piece of storytelling about the Confederate flag in South Carolina. I was really glad to be a part of it. When the shooting happened at Mother Emanuel, I went down the very next day and stayed for 2 weeks, just kind of hanging out, walking around the streets, talking to people. And I never felt so much sadness in my life.
Yeah.
But the resiliency of South Carolina was incredible, you know, and I think we did band together to do something that needed to be done a long time ago. You know, I always tell people that, you know, a flag is certainly just a symbol, and there's still a lot of remnants of the Confederacy and the flag still around. I was in Charleston last week up in this rooftop bar in Marion Square. If you look at Marion Square from up top, it literally has the paths make the Confederate flag in Marion Square, Charleston.
Really?
I don't know if you ever noticed that. Yeah, it's
that.
unbelievable. And so there's so much history here that we don't talk about. And I think the only way you can move forward with some of that dark history is to kind of talk about it, tell the truth, tell the complete stories. And again, it's storytelling. That's what storytelling can do for you.
Yeah, and that was one of the things, too, is that, you know, in the article that I wrote about, we need to get rid of Confederate Memorial Day. And there's a lot of jobs they'll try to, like, hide the fact it's Confederate Memorial Day and not say anything to you. I remember I used to work for this other nonprofit, and they were trying to do this it was this company appreciation day where they take us to some place and there's like water and they're bringing out food and barbecue and there's prizes and there's games. And one of the breaks, because I didn't realize what was going on.
Sure. We
had a break. I went outside. There was this small airplane with this huge, like, you know, one of those like signs at the end of it. And the shit says, "May the South rise again," with a big, huge Confederate flag. And then I realized, this is Confederate Memorial Day.
Yeah.
And I worked for a nonprofit. That meant that the building that I worked in was going to be closed that day.
So you have to go somewhere else.
Yes. And they didn't want the black employees asking why we closed today. Right. So you start to see, like, you know, different ways that people try to like hide and sweep stuff under the rug and not talk about it. And that's my thing, too. I think that when it comes to those conversations as a black person, I don't get angry about the conversation. I get angry when you telling me that what I feel is a figment of my imagination.
Sure, and 100%, and the validation, man. Like you don't get to tell me what's valid in my life and my feelings, and I think that's part of the conversation that sometimes gets askew. You know, I worked at a place one time and I was explaining to somebody how I thought, you know, things in the building could have been better. And this person told me, like, no, I don't see it that way. I said, well, it's not happening to you.
Yeah, exactly.
we're not having the same experience, you know? And I think sometimes, you know, validating thoughts and feelings from someone else is one of the hardest things we can do because you think your experience is what everybody else's is.
Yeah.
And not just in black and white. It's women, men, you know, age, you know, all kind of things. You know, being able to validate everybody's experience as that person is something I think is really key in terms of building the kind of community we want to live in.
I think the biggest thing too, when you see like certain places, and there's been places in South Carolina that's trying to book ban and take books out of the curriculum,
sure.
which I also think is funny because it's just like, kids are really hilarious. You tell a kid, don't read this, they're going to find it, right?
100%.
And plus,
me too. By the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if a child is like, oh, you don't want me to read, I'm going to look this up. Plus, also, the fact that you're banning books or trying to ban books, kids can find the information without trying to find a physical book. It's like, I mean, but to me,
and kids are really smart.
Yeah, absolutely. And my thing is, well, especially with kids now, this generation has the most access.
Sure.
To information and history better than anybody else. Sure. So like back in the day, I always thought it's funny. Like if you hear somebody saying they did research, I always automatically think of them going into a library.
Card catalog.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Decimal system.
Yeah, and it's like a montage of taking off their glasses and rubbing their eyes, and there's somebody saying, we're closing 10 minutes, right? Now, people say they do the research and just go to a TikTok video or something like that. Yeah. You know?
I do think part of what you're saying is so true in terms of the amount of information that's available to people these days. But I do think one thing that I realize with social media and Facebook and everything that's available, people don't always look for to be informed. Mm-hmm. They look to be confirmed.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, a lot of times people have an idea and they go find sources that agree with them. Yeah. So clearly I'm right. And I think one of the biggest things that we can do as a people in society is think differently and gather opinions that are different than our own, because you may not be right. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to kind of understand. And that's what I try to do as best as I can. Like, I may not agree with you, but I want to hear what you have to say, even not to get political. But like back in the day, politics, it was called politics. People would politic. Mm-hmm. And I had an idea. You had an idea. Mm-hmm. We sit down and talk about our ideas. Mm-hmm. We try to find some middle ground. Yeah. That doesn't happen anymore in government and sometimes not even in communities, right? You know, so trying to find the best way forward for things has to be a group kind of community decision. But now everybody's so this is my way or the highway. And that gets nobody anywhere. Yeah,
someone said this and I thought this was really interesting. They were like, back in the day, you would have a political issue that you present an issue and you got two people from two separate sides and say, hey, here's an issue. We might disagree on how to handle it or how to approach it.
Sure.
Now what happens is people are disagreeing that the issue exists at all. Right? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that's really frustrating.
That's a great point.
And so what I think ends up happening is that one of the things that I'm feeling more as a Southern thing when I think about the banning of books and a pushback on DEI, I think people make this mistake that studying history is supposed to be a pleasant thing.
Oh yeah, sure.
And it's not.
No.
Like it's never, I mean, especially look, the simplest of conversations are triggering to my family. And I don't even know when it's happened. Like, for an example, I was joking with my mom about wanting to buy a house. And I told her there's three things I want. She said, what's that? I said, I want to get my house within a year.
Yeah.
I want to have me a basketball goal in the backyard.
That's what's up.
And I'm like, I want a German Shepherd. And my mom was just like,
German Shepherd.
Yeah. She's like, the same dogs that used to stick on us. Right? You know what I mean?
I think you're right about the history. Right. I was fortunate enough to travel to Sierra Leone in 2019 to work on a documentary about transatlantic slave trade. We went to Bunce Island, which was an island outside of Sierra Leone on the coast where they would take the enslaved people and keep them there. And the ships would come and pick them up and they would take them to America or Europe, where they were going. And I remember getting off the boat and going to that island, and it felt, I physically felt ill. And I think sometimes being uncomfortable lets you understand how difficult things are.
Yeah.
But nowadays nobody wants to be uncomfortable either, right?
Yeah.
But it's so difficult to move forward when we don't make ourselves uncomfortable with our past.
Yeah. Why go to the gym when I can go get some Ozempic? You know what I'm saying?
You trying to start a battle rap? You trying to start a battle rap? I'm not involved, Kendrick. No, I got nothing to do with it.
Shout out to Drake and his abs. Shout out to your abs that you paid for, right? Which is hilarious. And I never thought that a battle like a hip hop battle would talk about plastic surgery. You know what I mean? Like
America. Yeah. I love what you all are doing with this platform because I do think finding a way to talk about issues in a smart way, in a relatable way, is fantastic. Like I said, and similar to when you launched, there's some incredible reporters in the state, and they do great work. But I think having a different platform to give people more opportunities for information is amazing.
Well, I also think, and this might not be, my bosses might not think this, but I think this in a way. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm just saying my personal way of interpreting this is that sometimes, especially like me being as a columnist here in South Carolina,
sure,
I can take a subject that's really, really important to me or something that's really, really frustrating or something that impacts me as a Black person in the South. And somehow, some way, you got to take all these thoughts, all these feelings and get that shit under 700 words.
Yeah.
Right. So I might want to expound, but I'm like, oh shit, my word count's coming up.
Yeah.
I think a podcast having conversations is probably going to be the most effective way that I think is impactful. That if we have young people that are running for something in South Carolina, that you only see their pictures on a flyer or on a campaign thing, to give them an opportunity to talk about who they are.
Sure.
Like, I care less about this being a 60 Minutes interview. I'm more interested in, I want to humanize these people that are working, right?
Yeah.
Because
that's great.
Because there's a lot of people that are running for political office that never thought they were going to run for political office.
Yeah.
Right. And they felt compelled, or like it feels a necessity to do it. And so very rarely do you find those people that just know that's what they're going to do.
No, I agree.
Right. You know what I mean?
I think it's something you're called to do. And I do think it's more important than ever that we have good people running for political office. To your point, it's not something that anybody would volunteer to do. It's a thankless job.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, people are going to be upset with you. But I do think it's important to have people that are good people, that care about the communities, that want to see things happen in a way that's positive, run for office.
I see a future politician.
I don't know. I mean, it's funny because even this executive director position, like I said, is not something I sought out. But I do think I have thoughts on things, and I think deeply about things, and to my point I said earlier, I read a lot of things that I don't agree with to try to make sure I'm getting the best information possible. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I mean, nobody's making an announcement on the podcast today. But I don't know. Like I said, because I do think, and this is one thing I've been really thinking about a lot lately. Actually, is like policy change, and like so, in order for policies to change, you have to be in a position to make policy, and you don't get to make policy unless you get elected to office, and you don't get elected to office unless you run for office. So all those things are things that I think about because I do think I think November is going to be one of the most important elections of my lifetime, and I think equating policy change to the vote is something that needs to happen in the political spectrum. Everybody tells people they got to go out and vote, but nobody kind of connects it to, okay, you vote for this person makes policy, the policies affect your life. And so to me, trying to connect those two things is something that I think is really important for whatever party you believe in, to connect policy to voting. Everybody now just tells me, well, this candidate thinks this, I think that's terrible, vote for me.
Yeah.
But I want to know what you think.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say that, in 2016 when Trump won, I think that one of the major things, I mean, this is definitely revisionist, turning back and looking back at it. But one of the things I always remember that happened with Hillary was that I think more than anything else, I think Hillary and the Democrat Party was just like, look, I'm not this guy. Right. And theoretically, she's just like, this guy is a mess.
This got to work.
Yeah. Me saying this should be enough. Right. And we totally underestimated what the country was going to do.
Sure.
But I think now, instead of saying that I'm not this terrible person that's running,
sure,
I also need to hear, well, who are you?
Yeah. Who are you? Yeah,
and I think that's one of those things that, art is really important in that. And having platforms like this is giving people opportunity. So I'll also say, I'm wondering, there are a lot of artists that in Columbia, and I grew up feeling like this, where I felt like I was by myself with whatever I wanted to create, right? I was by myself and I didn't have any resources. Yep. If I want to do an event or a show, if I don't have the money for it, if I don't have this, I had to do a lot of stuff on my own. So to the young artists out there that aren't aware of some of the things that One Columbia can provide, what are some of the things that a creative could do to lean on certain things that are available to them as creatives in the community? Yeah.
Shoot us an email. Reach out. We've got a group that meet in the house now twice a month. It's like an artist creative collective. They do everything from talking about taxes, talking about how to file your business license, talking about how to write grants.
Wow.
We got a session coming up next month. It's really going to just be a meetup where people can just get together and kick around ideas. Kind of like in the old days, you would be able to go to a bar and just talk. So I like this, trying to provide space for people. Like I said, you're not alone. And I think sometimes it can be a very lonely goal if you're trying to make it as an artist, wherever you are, not just Columbia. So there's a community here that's concerned with you and wants to help you do something better.
Yeah.
And One Columbia, certainly, we're trying to be that place, that hub, not just for artists, of course, but also for other local small nonprofits. We have some incredible venues in town, other bigger nonprofits that do amazing work. CMA, the Nickelodeon Theater, Kogo Center, Ed Adventure, Historic Columbia does incredible work. But some of the smaller nonprofits need a little guidance. And so we're trying to be a place that you can come to get resources in terms of how to find funding and how to find volunteers if we need them, and how to find art to put up in your venue. We did a partnership with the Boy Innovation Center last third Thursday. And so there's a tech hub down in 5 Points, and they want to get more involved with art because there's certainly an intersection between tech and art. So we have some curation going on in their space with some artists up there hanging their work for sale. And so you get more exposure. So I think there are tons of crossover in Columbia in terms of how we can work together to give artists more resources to be able to be working artists in Columbia, which is what artists want to do.
Absolutely. I think that when I first started doing work for the Arena, they were talking about primarily we want to talk a lot of politics on the pod, and they were thinking about like an 80-20 split. And I was like, look, my theory is always, everything's political. Everything's political. Yeah. And it's connective tissue with all this stuff. You know what I mean? If you're an artist encouraging people to buy your shit, that's a political thing, man. Right? Yeah. If you make a decision to put yourself out there as a creative, that's a political statement.
Terrifying too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You know that. I mean,
look, I joke all the time. I say that, statistically, the number one fear that people have is public speaking.
Yeah.
Number 2 is death.
Yeah.
So the average person would rather be the person in the casket than the one giving the eulogy.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
and
wow.
so there's when I understand that, there's a level of humility I have when people put themselves out there.
Sure.
And I want to respect that, you know, and I'm glad with the work that you're doing, man. And I appreciate it. I appreciate you pulling up. And anything you need, just let me know.
No, like I said, thanks for having me. Like I said, I'm just honest. Like I said, I've seen the work you've been doing and the guests you've been having on here. And like I said, it's been an MVP of people throughout the state because that's the respect that people give to you because of what you've been doing around the community.
Appreciate
so thank you.
You hear that, guys? Give me a raise.
I'm giving him his flowers while he's living. I tell people all the time, and I think that's another thing. Not to prolong this, I think one thing we got to do more of is celebrate people now.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah, well, same back to you, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate all the guidance and look at you as a mentor, especially that you acknowledge that you're much older than me. Since you're much older than me.
Fine.
Yeah. And looking at this, I need to, man, these arms are so blank, man. I need some tattoos. Anyways.
Hey, that's an art form.
Yeah.
That's an art form.
Tattoos are a gym.
That's
one of the two. Anyways, excuse my beigeness. This is Pre-Check Us once again with the Worthy Cause podcast for the Arena Network. Go to thearenasc.com. Thank y'all for checking out my man Xavier. Please support what he's doing with Columbia. Get involved. Check out the website. We'll have more information. Thank y'all so much. Till next time. Peace.